Asithandazeni babe siyakubonga namhla ekseni uNkulunkulu welezulu nemhlabathi. Sibonga Nkosi ukusivumela ukuthi sifike namhla ekseni isidonda nomsebenzi lophethelene lelive. Siyakubonga Nkosi ukuthi usinika ukuhlakanipha nekuconza. Sivumele ke Nkosi sisaqala usihole ngemandla akho lamakhulu uze lo msebenzi
are contained in the following key national documents. One is the National Development Plan. Two is the Eswatini Strategic Roadmap. These two documents were produced by the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, as well as the Prime Minister's Office. There is also the Economic Recovery Plan, which was produced by Cabinet with the implementation process being chaired by the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade. Finally, we have the Rapid Socio-Economic Assessment of COVID-19 in Eswatini. This was produced by the United Nations Development System in Eswatini with collaboration with the Economics Association of Eswatini. These documents complete or complement each other very well. They do so in the effort towards the promotion of the country's Build Back effort. The success of these documents will come in the form of achieving these Build Back objectives. And in turn, the policies which are followed in achieving these objectives, they are, or they should be based on appropriate economic analysis. The policies must be well informed. Well informed in the sense that you provide all the evidence which will convince the listener or the reader that you are indeed implementing the appropriate policy. This is what the research organizations in the country strive for. Certainly, ECAS strives for evidence-based policies. I must say that the landscape for researchers in the country is quite extensive. It includes, over and above ECAS, the research department at the Central Bank, Eswatini Economic Policy and Research Council, departments of economics and agricultural economics at the university, as well as the Center for Financial Inclusion. When you pull all of these together, you have an awesome amount of research capability in the country. I wish to highlight the fact that in welcoming you here, we also want to make a statement regarding the menu of research in the country. In January 2020, we approved worrisome unemployment rate, which is stubborn. Analysis must also take into account the evils of poverty and unequal income distribution. We also have a middle class which is presently very small, but it is the potential power for driving the Eswatini economy, which means that the impact on the middle class must be analyzed carefully, and appropriate policies must then be implemented. Are there lessons which can be learned from other countries, including our neighbors, in this context? Can we also use the sources that are available electronically in order to get the information that is useful for coming up with an appropriate policy? Usually there are movements of different parts of the system. You will have an intention to improve the lot of low-income households, but at the same time, that's going to have an impact on the middle class, which I would like us to really take seriously. You kill the middle class, you basically kill the whole economy. Are there lessons? Yes, there are. In the case of corporate taxation, you also want, that becomes another moving point that has to be taken into account, because it translates itself into purchasing power for the households, where you have our favorite middle income. What is the impact, or what should be the impact of tax changes on corporate taxation, including the public enterprises? I'm putting this question as an illustration of the kind of thinking that must be going on as we try to get to a situation where there is an adequate, or there is an appropriate, there's an appropriate policy in position. We have to come up with an evidence-based policy suggestion, which we will convey to the relevant people, stakeholders, and the Honorable Minister for Finance will be the key recipient for the critique of in the country. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome, and meet me outside earlier than now. Thank you very much. You should forgive me for missing this one, but at the same time, it is an entitlement for people like myself. You all know the story of the forgetful professor. Otherwise, I have been given this important task of inviting the Honorable Minister for Finance, Honorable Neil Reichenberg. Please take the floor, sir, the podium.
Thank you so much, Professor, for the good analysis. Welcome to everyone here, Deputy Governor, Honourable MP Khumalo, PS, officials, executives from the private sector. It's really wonderful to be able to all get together like this. and have an unpacking of the budget speech, unpacking of the way forward, so we all just get a better understanding, not necessarily from a political point of view, but we can really focus on the economics and get a good feeling in the room. What's the idea economically around the budget? So really appreciate this opportunity and thank the central bank profusely for always putting it together and for making this work. I think we'll start today, and that is that with the IMF. At the moment, as a country, we are obviously a part of the IMF, myself actually being one of the governors as the Minister of Finance. The IMF is really a body that sees, that they've seen it all before. They've seen every country battle with what they battle with. They've seen where they succeed. They've seen where they fail. And they give very good advice on what they can do. Again, we need to understand the IMF can't give you advice to say, hey, if in your region, if you want to outcompete your neighbors, you must do A, B, C, D. They can't give us that kind of advice because they're a global entity. But when it comes to what you can do economically in general and what you can do to make savings, brilliant advice that they give us, and we really have been focusing and building our relationship with the IMF over the last few years. The IMF comes out with what they call Article 4. Now, an Article 4 time is not a fun time for finance. It's always a lot of work and a lot of questions, a lot of time we spend at the IMF. But there's Article 4, the analysis that comes out after doing an Article 4 is really an extremely good guide of what you can do to try to fix your economy and to try and get things right. Over the last few years, over the last period, if I can put it that way, the IMF has been very clear. And if you had to analyze what the last few Article 4s have been saying, there are really 7 critical areas that they've been saying, Eswatini, you need to fix these areas, you need to get these areas right. One being the overspend on CTA. The second one being the overspend on the Palala Fund. The third one being overspending on budget. So just you have a budget as a country, and somehow you just overspend on the budget. Another one being you're on an unsustainable path, is to say at the path that you are on, your debt is growing too quickly. You are going to get to a point where you cannot afford to repay your debt. And as a country, when you get on an unsustainable path, it is really very, very tough to get off. Another one is our arrears. To run an economy and to have a huge pack of arrears you're dragging with you is something they're saying was really going to kill your economy. Another one that they say was a major problem is our wage bill. Is to say you have to fix the wage bill as a country, and you need to sort that out. And so as a country, we've been having a look at all these elements and trying to see what we can do to try to fix them and to try and get them right. So if I can maybe start by unpacking to say what are we doing as a country and where are we on these matters. I think the first one, let me start at CTA. As everyone will know very clearly in this room, we made a decision as a government to shut the trading account of CTA, because it was through the trading account that there were hundreds of millions every year, be it in every report and every time we get our financials tabled in the House. There's always a lot of criticism around CTA. And by shutting the trading account, again, not a simple thing to do, not an easy thing to do, a lot of pain involved with doing that, a certain amount of confusion. There's a bit of a, let me call it a blunt tool that was used to be able to try and get it in line, and there's been a certain amount of pain through this period of doing it. But at the same time, we can stand here today and say the last year, with the trading account being shut, it has actually been below budget as CTA. Now, yes, maybe certain things haven't been done, but we have to start somewhere, and we're building up from it. As we stand here now, things like fuel, whatever, has all been brought into line, and things are looking a lot better. Second one is Palala. On that one, we managed to get support from the Clinton Foundation. A team came into Eswatini, and we really managed to sort that out. The Palala is now also within budget. In fact, it also spends below budget currently, and it is an item that has virtually been fixed. Another one is the wage bill. Now, again, the budget speech, I think, unpacked the wage bill quite well to say where we come from. The years between, I think it was 2013 and 2018, we had an average of about 12% growth in the wage bill. So the IMF was spot on to say, Eswatini, this is an unsustainable path you're on with the wage bill. We then implemented a hiring freeze in 2018. And this hiring freeze has managed, again, very painful, really not fun, really a lot of stress and strain in the system. But the hiring freeze has managed to bring it down to, instead of a 12% growth, it's been a 0.64% growth in the wage bill ever since the hiring freeze has been put in place. As a country, obviously, we need to consider all the different things that we're doing. This year, we're going to have to look at it again. There are some critical posts that need filling, but every time there are some critical posts, Cabinet is approached, a waiver is considered for those critical posts, and the critical posts are filled. So hence, we're managing to somehow get going. Many ministries are complaining now of understaffing. This all needs to be looked at and all needs to be considered. The other one is the budget spend. So what we had was we just had ministries constantly spending over their budgets. As government, as PPC, we sat with the ministries for a period of time, every second month, and shame, the budget team obviously worked extremely hard in the Ministry of Finance. The ministries themselves all really put their shoulder to the wheel, and every second month, one looked at every ministry's budget. One says, where are we? Where are you overspending? And it was a very good time also, but from the Ministry of Finance, to actually really see where do the ministries really have trouble. And sometimes you can say, right, no, you have to just spend less. And sometimes they can't. Sometimes the utility bills are just what they are, and you have to consider that. Again, we would, I think last year we came to the House with about 5 supplementary budgets, so Honourable Khumalo was also working very hard in the background with us with our supplementary budgets as the committees. But we really try to bring in the disciplines. If you need to spend money, get approval in the right places legally before money is spent. Those disciplines have been put in place, and right now it is virtually solved, but at the same time, obviously one sees from the AG's report, there are still little overspends, but in general now, we spend below where we would normally have spent, and that has been brought in line. So when it comes to now our the unsustainable path that we're on, as Eswatini, what we're doing is we were in a period where our fiscal deficit, so the problem is with a country, when your fiscal deficit, which means the difference between the money that you have and the money that you're spending, when that is too high, and we come from an area of it being around 7.5% fiscal deficit, that just means that as a country, you're taking on 3 to 4 billion emalangeni more debt every year, and you are really running your economy or topping up your economy with debt, which just means every year you're growing with a few percentage points on your debt to GDP ratio. Obviously, an unsustainable path. We then had very good engagements with IMF, with the World Bank, with AFDB, and we put ourselves on what one can almost call a program, but it was a self-inflicted program. It was a program we said, we as a country are putting ourselves on a medium-term framework. Once again, a huge amount of effort went in from the budget team on this, and we are planning to go from this 7.5 more or less average fiscal deficit down to 1%. Now, if you have a 1% fiscal deficit, you need to understand that it is regarded as a sustainable path, because even if you have a little bit of growth in your GDP, it means that your GDP growth is cancelling that out, and your debt to GDP ratio remains the same. So hence, there's been a lot of work on this, and again, very, very tough things we've had to do. We have maintained the support from the IMF, the World Bank, the AFDB. They've been very good in helping us with the budget support during the period. But the year that we are in still, we've managed to bring it down to 6.5%. You will see from the budget that's being tabled, it's going down to it moves a bit, 4.6 to 4.7%. And the year after that, the numbers are showing, and we are very confident it will be at the 1% range. So we have managed to really bring that spend into line. Now, that spend speaks obviously to many different items. At the same time, as a government, we have the SACA receipts, which we are too dependent on, and which have caused a lot of pain in our budget processing, in getting it right, and trying to make sure that SACA receipts does not ultimately mean that as the SACA receipts goes up or down, your economy at the same time goes up or down with it. We need to try and find stability there. We've been on a bit of a roller coaster ride with our SACA receipts, because as SACA receipts go up, we spend what we have. When SACA receipts go down, we then try and fill the gap with debt, and that's what's got us into trouble. So what we have managed to get right with SACA receipts, again, the SACA receipts have come right slightly. We were expecting a nightmare of a year, the year that's coming. It was looking at 4.3 billion emalangeni. Luckily, SACA is looking a bit better. That is one element, but at the same time, we've done a few measures as a country. because we found ourselves moving down from we used to get about 13% of SACA receipts about 15 years ago as a country compared to the other countries of the SACA pool. That's moved down to about 7% over time. And it's something which we felt we could do things about. Again, very unpopular things we did. Things like the Dubais. I think I'm going to be remembered for this Dubai story because somehow it became almost personal at some stage. Fuel, just being strict at the borders, making sure that we actually make whatever comes in, make sure we recognize the VAT on it. And different measures like that have meant that also are starting to have an impact on our SACA receipts, those measures that we've done. Last year, we were the smallest country that got SACA, so we got the smallest amount. The year that we are going into, we are no longer the smallest country that receives SACA receipts, hence it proving that the percentage is starting to move. There's a bit of movement there, and it means that the year that we are going into now, instead of 4.3 billion, it's 5.8 billion. But the big thing is that the projection on the following year, 2023-2024, it's projected to be 8.7 billion Emalangeni SACA receipts. And again, I think that's being conservative because the measures that we have done are only slightly impacting this coming year, but it's fully impacting year 2023-2024. Hence, the feeling is that even the estimation is probably on the low side. Now, to be able to take care of the volatility, we're really starting with the regulations now. Regulations, or the drafting of regulations, has already been approved by Cabinet to put in a SACA stabilization fund, which means that when SACA is up, we're going to be taking a haircut on it. We're going to be putting that money in reserves, obviously at Reserve Bank, and then when SACA receipts go down again, because these things are volatile, we can take out of the fund, and putting our economy on a lot more sustainable path, a lot more stable path compared to where we were. So from a sustainability point of view, is really the crux. This is what investors look at. If you're expecting investors to invest in the country, and as a country you are unsustainable, it's a bit difficult expecting an investor to say, oh, let's invest in this country when I'm expected to have a sustainable business, but the country itself is on an unsustainable path. So hence, as a country, one can look at all these different areas and try to look at what we can do to bring in investment. But unless we get the macros right, and I think the message I'm trying to get through this morning, and that is that as a country we've got a lot to do. Really, there is one can criticize government for a very long time. I can criticize government for a long time myself. Even there's many different things. You look at our maintenance is lacking. Whatever. Look at the amount of cars at CTA that need to be sold on auction. We can talk for days on all the different things that need to be fixed. But honestly, unless we fix the macros, and that's why I'm speaking to this room, because this room understands fixing these macros and getting. Unless we fix the macros and get the foundation right of our economy, whatever we're doing, fixing of the roads and everything else, is really just patching on in fact, it's trying to patch a house that is just not on a good foundation. And hence, I really believe that with what we have done, we've really managed to deal with all of these major issues that have been exposed by the IMF with these Article 4s. There are a lot of small ones, which we are still dealing with, and like I said, we can talk for a long time on those. And areas where government's failing, by me saying that we've had a certain amount of success here, I'm no means saying, oh, that means government is succeeding at this point, government is doing well. Many areas, especially on service delivery, there's a lot of room for improvement to get this right. But at the same time, I think one does need to recognize the fact that when it comes to the foundation of the country, the economics, when one looks at the reserves, and this is really, I thank Central Bank for this. I'm not going to try and claim anything that we've got right here. But by us having a positive trade balance, the Central Bank, I think the first bill I brought was one the Central Bank came to take through, which was where the Central Bank has first right on Forex in the country before the banks could really do with the Forex like they wanted. But at the moment, the Central Bank does mop up those Forex that comes available to us as a country, and it means our reserves are constantly getting better. At some point in 2019, the reserves were down to 1.8 months import cover. Dangerous levels we're going down to. If a country runs out of Forex, it's got all sorts of terrible domino effect on the economy going forward. Once you get to that point as the economy runs out of Forex, very, very tough to climb out of that hole, because the people that bring in Forex now hold on to their own Forex. And there's a pattern there. So by us managing to get our reserves back up to an average of about 3.5 months import cover, and it continues to improve. We'll see this coming year. We are not so sure this coming year exactly what it's going to be looking like, because we're expecting low SARC receipts. Now SARC receipts are slightly better. We're hoping still to have a positive trade balance, but as long as we have that, we do believe reserves will remain intact. And just continuing to get these macros right, I think, is really putting us onto a lot more sustainable path. Once we have a sustainable path, once we've fixed all these critical items that have been done, which I can really attest to, a lot of these macro issues have been sorted out. It means, as a country, our foundation is better. We can now start building, we can start patching, we can start fixing a lot of things on a better foundation. Maybe just to touch quickly on the tax matter, and I'll end with this one, and that is that it will be great to have different analysis on it. Obviously, as finance, we don't just take things out of the air. We do a lot of research ourselves on what the right thing is to do. As a country, unfortunately, we don't have the resource, we don't have the money to be able to throw at trying to fix inequality or trying to sort out the taxation starting from too low. Taxing a person 20%, earning 3,500 emalangeni is causing inequality and causing the poor to get poorer, and hence one does try to, we've tried to bring this measure. As you know, as a team here, our resources are just too little. As long as you're relying on debt, one really can't necessarily, as government, step in. Hence, we've looked at the region, had all sorts of external views on it. We've had IMF come and also give us advice on it. Hence, this measure to propose. It must all go through. I know going through is going to be very tough. Honourable Khumalo is shaking his head already. He's sitting there. But ultimately, it is, that measure is trying to do that, and we'll see how it ends up looking. But government was not trying to make a cent out of this. Government was purely taking from the top, putting in the bottom. Again, at the same time, the 27 to 25% corporate tax, or 27.5 to 25% corporate tax, government, again, we're actually not losing money in that measure. We can't afford to lose money. I must just be honest and just put it straight. What we managed to do is just look at measures that we could do to be able to balance that. So hence, by us bringing in presumptive tax into companies, now again, sorry, presumptive tax to SMEs, but by us bringing a capital gains tax into companies, it is the right thing to do, colleagues. I think if those of you that understand this, to bring in personal capital gains tax is probably not right, because we're not comfortable with it yet as finance, even though many countries are going down that road. Once I've used my after-tax money to build my house, and now you say, well, okay, and I do improvements out of my pockets with my after-tax money, and now to say, when I sell my house, if I get more than what I bought it for, now you must pay in the balance of tax. It's obviously, it doesn't feel right as a country. We're still grappling with that one. We're not comfortable with that. But as a business, if you've bought a shed or bought a workshop or something, and you ultimately write off the tax that you bought it with, write off from tax whatever you spend on it, write off from tax when you pour concrete, write off from tax when you paint it and improve it, and one day sell it, it's not right to say to government, oh, this is now capital gains and I'm not paying tax on it. Government's been part of the process of getting that building from where you bought it to where it is. It is the right thing to do, and companies were using loopholes. So doing things like that, we're penalizing late payments of PAYE. We are disallowing some of the previous allowables. We're also balancing that measure from going down to 27.5 to 25. So once again, it's almost, one can see it, it's the companies themselves that are going to be paying for that reduction in corporate tax, so that one can actually, as a government, not lose money. We can't afford to lose money on it. It's a balancing act. So there's a balancing act taking place on the PAYE scale, and there's a balancing act taking place on the tax scale. But we do feel, after doing this, we are leaving the economy in a better place. That's the principle, that's the concept of what we're trying to do there. So I think we'll still continue to have some presentations, we'll have some questions. I enjoy answering questions, so please don't feel, there's no way one's not allowed to go. You're very welcome to ask what everyone wants to ask when the time comes, and let's continue enjoying the morning together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Can I see the list of our speakers so that they can see the order with which they will come to the podium? I do know that Clement Lamini will start for us. I think I saw you first in the list. you will start. I think we will also have Mr. Gina from Tukoso, followed by Emmanuel and Langamandla. The next one, please. I don't want to miss the order, you know. Yes, I think I was almost there. Mr. Clement Lamini from UNESA will start for us and raise a few points. He represents social, youth, and vulnerable groups. Mr. Nlangamandla will represent NGOs, will also speak. Mr. Mtutuzi Gina will follow, followed by Honorable Mawik from from Parliament, and then Mavi Twala, who represent UNDP, will end for us. Clement, please come to the podium. Not more than 9 minutes.
May I be allowed to remove this for a second? Honorable Minister of Finance, members of Parliament, cabinet ministers, the governor of the CBE, civil society organizations, where I sharpened my teeth. I always love to acknowledge them. My colleagues from academia, if they are here, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So to avoid what Dlamini was saying, I'm going to read. Then where I need to explain, maybe I'll just speak for a second. Let me start by appreciating your efforts, Honorable Minister, together with the PBC and all others who were involved, for coming up with a budget, especially in these tough and perilous times. So I, as part of today's session, I thought, you know, to show a bit of an understanding of what the budget is. In my definitions, I figured that you know, the government takes money from taxes and fees and spends it on critical issues. And might I emphasize and say critical issues. I made here an example of education, health, infrastructure, grants for research. I was happy the Prof spoke about research, the arts and social programs where I am working. What becomes important when budgeting in an environment is to ensure that the budget is participatory. And I know every time I'm asked to speak about budgeting, I always emphasize the element of participatory budgeting. For the simple reason, participatory budgeting is a form of engaging citizens and getting them involved in deciding or making input in terms of how the public purse is actually spent. Citizen participation is meant to facilitate that the citizens take up the role of also being scrutinizers, and they monitor the process following the allocation of budgets. This therefore does not just become the jurisdiction of members of parliament, but the public holds the government accountable. And this is not just as watchdogs or policing, but it is to ensure budget accountability. And for me, I've always said from my time at civil society that it also becomes important that we don't just monitor something that we've not participated in. So our monitoring should be based on the fact that we had some form of leverage and input in how the budget is formulated. And especially because we are players on the ground and we have an appreciation of the issues that are underlying on the ground. So it would be wise for us to be considered as inputters in the budget. let me go to, before Skumbuzo makes me sit down. Under the Youth and Welfare Honorable Minister, you made the following statement. I said, I want to take this opportunity to encourage entrepreneurs to start following their dreams with the limited resources that they have. And I bolded that because we have limited resources. And then you stated and said a loan should be a stimulus to your business and not the start. You might think that you have no resources, but every Swati has access to some form of resource, such as land, and I will encourage you to develop an entrepreneurial spirit and start with what you have. Having done a bit of some travel myself, I wouldn't want to brag and say I've been to many countries, but I've seen that countries that are doing well in areas of entrepreneurship, they establish a culture of business, which is not, for me, I always say to my students, it's not like oxygen that you breathe in and breathe out and then you are an entrepreneur. You engage with a culture which is established at a very, very young age. For me as an educator from primary school. So to respond to this, Honorable Minister, the government needs to consider issues of access to the land that you are actually mentioning here. The big question is, how easy is it to access land at chiefdom level without them taking or making a young person jump the hoops, either because they are too young or they are not married or for whatever reason that makes them not to make the cut. Land ownership also is another issue. We in Eswatini have what you call user rights on Swazi Nation land. So it's not easy for us to just wake up one morning and go commercial on Swazi Nation land. So the issue of user rights versus ownership. Business development training is also critical. Is there an appetite in the country for youth going into business? Is there an appetite that's there? Because what we see is most of them, when you analyze some of the funds that we have that are provided by the budget and by the state, you find that young people will apply for this, but they will not do anything about it because they have no intention to go into the space of business. So we need to measure that appetite because it becomes important. So market surveys that speak to who we are doing business for and for what reason. If we are doing it for subsistence purposes, it is a different story. If you want to go big and go commercial, because and play with the big guns, the big question is, do we have space to play with the big guns at that level? So if you're saying young people must engage in business, the big question is, can they play in the same space where other businesses are playing? Do they have the power to play in that space? I propose that we go, I'm going to borrow a word that you used also earlier when you were speaking. I propose that we go beyond the rhetoric, but be intentional about youth entrepreneurship and engage them on their needs. Allow them to be versatile and creative. And finally, when we invest in their businesses, we need to ensure very, very strong mentoring support. Because most of the young people are starting from a negative, which is why entrepreneurship for them is not a primary activity for them, but it's secondary. And I've seen some of my students who will come out with a very brilliant idea, go out in there because they have not got a job. As soon as they get a job, they quit the business because they need to build a house for their mother. They have to pay for their sisters in school. So for them, a constant income is a comfort. So they decide to stay and not go into business. So they find themselves having to take care of their family. I started from negative. I'm also one of those. I had to start by building my mother a house before I could think about business. So I had to get a job that was going to sustain me whilst I build a house for my mother. So it becomes then fundamental for us then when we say they must go into business, there's access to land. What are we really talking about when we say that? Some of us come from, I've already said, come from single households where we are bearing the brunt of the baggage that comes with poverty and squalor. We think about entrepreneurship. If we fail to get a white collar or blue collar job. Since entrepreneurship is not a culture to us, but it's an alternative. So we cannot go on in this country and making business an alternative, but we can't push young people to do business if they don't understand what business is about. So creating easier and more conducive paths, stimulus to dignified work and entrepreneurship for the youth should not just be a line we repeat in every budget speech, but it must be accompanied by trackable milestones which should be reported on an annual basis. And I'm going to run quickly, Mr. Dlamini, Program Director. Given our huge income inequalities, our Gini coefficient, etc., the big question in the corridors, in social media, in the bars, in churches, and where people gather is whether the budget that was presented is actually pro-poor. Because pro-poor is not anti-rich, but pro-poor does consider improving social assistance grants, developing long-term solutions, and also investing in the education of our young people. So in that space, I get very fascinated, but I see a lack of appetite. I did a study last year on adolescent girls and young women in Ngundla, and all I could hear from the girls, they were saying, I can't start a business because when I bring in profits in the evening, they'll be taken for me to buy bread in the house. So I'm not profitable. So investing in business needs us to change a mindset. Let me run quickly. Looking at the presented speech, theoretically, now I'm answering the question. Theoretically, the budget is pro-poor in that it proposes some safety nets for the poor from young to old. We see that the number receiving government grants is also increasing, number of individuals or people. So persons with disabilities per constituency will be increasing. People with disabilities in Eswatini, but are estimated now, I looked at the numbers, the 20 to 88 that I saw in the budget. Currently we are at, according to the 2017 census, we are at 176,184 persons with disability in the country. Now, if you look at 20 to 88 and then multiply by 59, we may be way below what we are trying to support in our persons with disability. And of note is that the prevalence of disability in this country is higher than the average found in other developing countries, which is at 10% of the total population. So the prevalence of disability is much higher in rural areas. 82% of people with disabilities live in rural areas, whilst the remaining 18% live in urban areas. And all of them, parents, we speak to them, they don't have the capacity to take care of them. So they need support. So look at what the government was doing before. To the current promise, there is an improvement in the promise. The big question is, will this improvement help the poor to be better off than they were in terms of addressing their most basic needs? Because we want the country, we want our people to move beyond just basics. We want them to be able to sustain themselves. So if we dwindle in the spot of basic needs, then we are not moving the country a step ahead. I'm not going to talk to the text. You've already spoken about it. Thank you, Dlamini. I have just 3 or 4 questions that I'm just throwing in there. On the increase on pay as you earn, one issue that worries me is brain drain. I know you've explained the premise and what informs the increases, but I'm worried about losing the cream of the country because people are going to go somewhere else. And then last point is Kumbuzo, before you kill me. I think it is still true that when citizens are uncertain of the future, they tend to hold on to what they have. And sometimes will decide to leave. That's a brain drain. In times of crisis, people tend to suffer the most are the ones I'm talking about, the vulnerable, the poor, the women. Right now, we've got the youth in the country because they're the biggest. They're the biggest in terms of number. And these things lead to a lot of things. GBV, they lead to anger, aggression. If you look around and drive around, people are angry in this country. There's a lot of anger that's sometimes when we look at it, we see that we can attribute to the situation. Last point, after the shocks that came with the impact of COVID-19, and the civil unrest. One wonders if the amounts that are proposed are adequate to address the needs of those Emaswati who are living in the margins of society. Let us not forget that in every crisis, there is always a remnant that will suffer more than others. And we need to ask ourselves, who are those? Where are they? And how are they affected? Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. At this point, I would want to welcome Mr. Emmanuel Dlangamandla to the podium.
Program Director, Honorable Minister and your team, Central Bank Governor and your team, private sector and civil society representatives, all protocol observed. It's an honor once again to make some remarks in this auspicious occasion. Honorable Minister, I was happy to see you taking your breakfast because the last time I read, you drank water. Let me come to the issue at hand. This budget was presented against the backdrop of the twin track challenges of COVID-19 and civil unrest, which has seriously impacted the country, community, and more importantly, families, socially and economically. We in civil society expect this budget to be informed by these realities. The question is, does this budget respond to the twin crisis, or it is business as usual? Honorable Minister was honest in acknowledging key problems areas, such as limited job opportunities for young people, shortages of medicines, weak delivery in the education sector. Does this budget sufficiently address these challenges, including digitalization of education? Because COVID-19 has showed us that government needs to invest in technology to prevent inequality amongst the government and private learners or institutions. The Honorable Minister acknowledged that there is a loss of confidence and trust in government. Has this budget responded to the reality? Why are the victims of the unrest not yet reflected in this budget? In terms of allocation to health and education, the minister stated it is at the top 10% in sub-Saharan Africa, which is commendable, Honorable Minister. However, will the cash, Honorable Minister, be available on time for these ministries to honor their obligations? Because the issue of cash flow problems have been a recurring problem in this country. Building better from COVID-19 requires a strong social protection program, yet it seems there is very little investment in the elderly and the disability grants. Honorable Minister, what is the basis for prioritizing an elderly burial scheme? Has the budget catered for the operationalization of Disability Act of 2018? Government took time to reflect on the issues of disability, and there is an act in place which is supposed to establish key institutions and allocate the resources, but nothing has happened since 2018. It is disappointing that we all acknowledge the youth is frustrated and angry, but the budget does not reflect this reality. The question is why? Are training institutions like UNESCO and others subvented, Honorable Minister, going to be provided with sufficient resources to address the financial challenges? The last time I read, they are owing tax, maybe close to $1 billion or even over. Are scholarships awarded in accordance to the needs of the students, or it's just based on government affordability? I was lucky when I came from a very poor background. If I didn't get a scholarship funded by government, where will I be? Will government have recouped so much money from my tax if they didn't provide me with a scholarship? This is the reality. How can efficiency be improved, improving scholarships on time to prevent vulnerabilities by the students? We hear students, female students have to line up in the streets doing sex work in order to supplement and survive. This is the reality of poor people. With regards to the structuring of CTA, very good, Minister, we have canvassed it and we are happy. But the question I will leave with you is, has this improved petrol shortages, which affect service delivery? Has restructuring of Palala truly improved local delivery when it was reported in the media that 30 cancer patients were turned away because hospitals don't have the tools? Just recently ourselves, we had to fork out money to go to private sector just to get a diagnosis of cancer because Babane Government Hospital could not afford our mother, access. Yet government has said they provide free services. We had to fork out, get into crowdfunding and get over 30,000 just to get a diagnosis that you have cancer. This is very painful. We appreciate commitment to improve procurement of drugs and other initiatives aimed at improving the health sector. I think the health sector, good people, is currently in dire strait. And Honorable Minister, you are honest in terms of a lot needs to be done. Of course, the fiscus is the problem. How is government committing to invest on prevention of gender-based violence and violence against children? Gender-based violence is now a national crisis, for crying out loud. And if it is not reflected in our budgets, our women are going to be decimated by men, some of them in this forum. The prioritization on road maintenance and clean energy, I say thumbs up, Honorable Minister, on that one. On promoting human rights, the question that I want to pose to you and your team to think about, is the Human Rights Commission sufficiently funded? When will enabling legislation to promote its work be put in place so that when I have a grievance, I go to them, they are not just going to issue statements. They're just like now an advocacy group. It is wrong. Budgeting for dialogue is welcome, but government should be transparent. Government should give us hope that we will sit around the table and address the issues that divide us as a nation. Tax relief for low-income earners, welcome, Honorable Minister, but 36% proposed, I'm not sure. Because the problem that we have, Honorable Minister, is not that we don't want to be taxed. Some of us who are earning a bit, above the levels where we are cushioning the low-income earners, is that there is too much burden on us, taxpayers. Some of us, I have educated my children out of my own pocket. And like many of us here, you go to health facilities, you don't get access. Tax should be able to give me relief, but we are not getting the return on investment. We give you the tax, we will give you more, 36%, but are we going to get the return on investment? When I go to a public facility, will I get services? Even looking for an ID, will I get it on time? There must be return on investment in the security sector, Honorable Minister. We all know that there is always pumping of money into police, correctional, and the army. These institutions are not delivering services according to human rights-based approach. There's a lot of brutality, and we're unhappy as taxpayers. Tell them.
Please conclude.
May I conclude? Yes, right on time. There is a quote from USA President Excellency Joe Biden, which says, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you value. Thank you.
Right on time.
Mr. Kina, please, to the podium.
Honorable Minister and the High Table, and the delegates attending this seminar, good morning. Program Director, allow me to congratulate the Minister for delivering a national budget which set the tone in the distribution of wealth created by all Emaswati in their various spheres of their economic activism. Thank you for inviting us to this very important national building exercise. On the outset, we wish to declare our understanding of the difficulty that always visit any Minister of Finance in coming out with an all-sector appreciated budget allocation. The balancing act for a win-win allocation model becomes a tricky one. My presentation, which obviously I so pray it does not exceed the stipulated and the allocated time, perhaps then we'll deal with what is there for the workers and what is absent. And then perhaps what could be the way forward. We note the proposed increment of the pay-as-you-earn taxation from 33% to 36% for high income earners, which they have been referred to and defined as the upper class category. We welcome the move to relieve the low income earners, even from paying the taxation. This surely will make them have cash to spend and grow the economy in that process. We believe in a solidarity taxation regime. The flip of the coin, however, may point, as one of my colleagues has pointed out, may point to a brain drain of our fine professionals. We may not be attractive to the professionals whom we have developed. They will remain in the diaspora, notwithstanding that we need them for our human resource development. There is a proposal for the reduction of corporate tax from 27.5% to 25%. This may not have immediate benefits to the country, our view, as in it may not immediately benefit the country by attracting foreign direct investors. As a matter of fact, however, it will benefit instantly the existing businesses. It would have been appreciated by us if this was an investment incentive to be enjoyed for a particular period by businesses who opens up shop. It is not clear to us how will the deficit caused by the reduction, how will it be closed? We are asking, can the 3% pay as you earn increase close this gap? We fear that this gap may be attended to by invoking aggressive personal tax collection. There is still room, in our view, in the public debt borrowing to use it to kickstart the economy by increasing purchasing power of public sector workers, and by paying a basic income or social assistance program to poor people. Otherwise, the government, as reported, expects to create around 9,000 jobs through road construction, the construction of factory shells and other private sector initiatives, most of whom are notably within the construction sector. Worth noting is the fact that all these lined jobs are temporary in nature and do not resolve the crisis of unemployment currently taking place in the kingdom. Our emphasis on jobs is decency, not just jobs. I'm reminded of a minister in one of the SADC countries. We met somewhere and we were talking about this issue of decent work and decent jobs. And this guy was saying, yeah, you forgot. It can't be decency. It must be job first, then decency later. We don't think, we would not promote that kind of an approach. And obviously would frown on that kind of an approach. We believe a social assistance or basic income project will have a more immediate impact in the economy. In our view, the budget continues on a neoliberal assault as guided by the IMF and World Bank through the fiscal adjustment roadmap, and is guided by their policies that seeks to reduce social expenditure and the size of the civil service. The budget, for instance, calls for the selling of 15 public enterprises, an assault on public service, and a move that can make the provision of certain public services to be too expensive because of the profit motive that will inevitably come with its complete private character. The continued employment of the workers in these to-be new entities may not be guaranteed. A developmental nation such as Eswatini cannot yet afford to have a private sector-led developmental project because the private sector continuously is unable to create sustainable employment with decent wages. The dependency on the public and semi-public employment may have to be banked on if the intention is to keep money in the pockets of many for economic stimulation. We cannot afford to privatize at a high scale. Public service workers continue to bear the brunt of economic situation in the country. Every other time the public sector wage has been labeled as exorbitant. We hope the issue of ghost employees and misposted employees will be attended to with the urgency that it deserves. The issue of misposts, Honorable Minister, I was told, and I thought this guy, and to date, I only hope and pray that he was joking, saying you will find that someone who is doing some minor and manual work is getting salaried as a teacher. Yeah, in fact, of the records in the government system, he is a teacher. I am not sure whether it is true. But those are the issues of alleged missed posts that may have to be investigated along the lines of the ghost employees so that we can have a correct position on whether we are having an exorbitant wage bill. The violent clamping down of public sector wages is having ramifications in the economy in general.
3 minutes.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. We are encouraged by the sentiments indicating that there will be a consideration of the cost of living adjustment in this financial year for the public sector. The private sector is also following suit in clamping down on salaries of workers, and this will further limit the resuscitation of the economy and further loss of good businesses. An example, the closure of Kia in Babane was probably caused by lack of demand of their cars, something that has come as a result of increased pressure on the salaries of workers, particularly workers in the public sector. Mention is being made about new mining licenses. The legislative posture of this industry, the mining industry, needs to be attended. The hard decisions may have to be taken to make sure that legislatively proceeds from the natural resources contribute meaningful to the national purse. We only hope, as I come to an end, we only hope that an all-inclusive pre-budget activity be held in the future for contribution, ownership, and buy-in by every Liswati in its various, in all the various corners. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thanks, Program Director. Thank you very much.
Siyabonga Makadlela, ibamba isikhathi. Can I now request Honorable Mawick to the podium?
Honorable Minister, fellow panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I thank the Governor for extending an invitation to some of us. I'm not so much used to addressing esteemed people like yourselves. I normally address my fellow constituents who are not so sophisticated. But having said that, let me just, at the outset, I was actually taken aback when my brother, Dlangamandla, said something like, we will give you more, another 36%. And I didn't understand who does he mean by we. So that got me a little bit confused because the minister is aware that, you know, he will not be getting more anytime soon. And we have come to some kind of understanding in that regard. But ladies and gentlemen, let me just first, while I'm grateful to the Central Bank, let me just implore the Honourable Minister that the Central Bank remains an institution through which the country's financial credibility is measured. So we would humbly request the Honourable Minister to do everything in his power to ensure that there is no political interference at all on the Central Bank, because the minute political interference creeps into the Central Bank, then even our own financial partners internationally and elsewhere, they would be concerned. So we are, and I'd like to commend the minister that, you know, as we work so closely with each other, he has made it a point that political interference is actually, does not come near the Central Bank. And I hope you'll continue in that trend, Minister.
I'm saying this because I know that in some quarters there are some attempts, but yes, it remains steadfast in that regard. Having said that, once again, let me just extend the commendation. I think this is the last one. The issue of arrears. The minister has done a commendable job since he came to office, because the arrears, particularly the arrears that government owes internally in the country to suppliers, companies, private sector, they were running in billions. And honestly, of course, he has done this at the sacrifice of other more demanding responsibilities, but he has brought it down to manageable levels. I think you will all recall that there was an attempt from the government to borrow some billions just to finance the arrears. That didn't succeed because the loans, they were crazy loans. The people who wanted to give us those loans were not genuine. They were looking at taking some gold from us. So he did that and basically said, look, we'll do it internally. And he's done a remarkable job. And I commend you for that, Minister. Lastly, is City A. I came to Parliament 24 years ago, but from that moment, City A has been a heavy drain on the fiscus because of its unlimited access into the consolidated fund. And again, there was too much politics. Some of those who are so close to authority, they would fight tooth and nail to ensure that City A is not transformed in any way, because they were benefiting out of the arrangement. And I can tell you that the COVID, it was a bad pandemic, that it came at such a time. But at the same time, I can say with some very good authority that it helped in this regard, because the same people are still roaming around, but the difference is that this time around they were not able to gain access because of COVID. And the Neils and them were able to act and take advantage of that, close the account of City A, and nobody got to go anywhere. So we thank you for that, Minister. And you know you have our support in Parliament when it comes to that. Well, the commendation, that's where it ends, ladies and gentlemen. I don't believe that this budget is pro-poor. And he knows that it's not, so long as the social programs, in this budget are not clearly stated or given priority, you can't say it's pro-poor, And again, I'm not excited at the reduction of getting, the minister has just improved the benchmarking from 4,000 for those who, from 3.5 to 4,000 for those who will be relieved from paying income tax, as Babet Dlamini did allude to. I said to him in Parliament, the 3.5 has been in place for over 10 years. For over 10 years. Now, if you move a little bit up to 500, 4,000, over 10 years, I said to him, at least it would make sense if you had gone up to 4.5 thousand Malangan or to 5,000. Because if you look at the period and tie it up with the 500, it has been too long in coming. But still, it's something to recognize that there has been a movement. Otherwise, it's too little too late.
Go say 3 minutes. Mhlonishwa.
What? Ngisacala ukukhuluma. Ho. Cha no. Ngiyabonga Nkosi, I will respect that. The issue of 36% has been addressed fully and efficiently, and I know that the minister will still bring the bill to Parliament, and our position will not change. On the issue of fuel, unfortunately, I don't agree with the minister on the issue of the Dubais, the grey cars. I don't agree with them because a lot of our indirect taxation in the form of levies have been included in fuel. There is the traditional fuel levy that goes to natural resources. Last year, there is 80 cents that was included by the minister to support the budget, 80 cents. Then later on, we included another 35 cents for the fuel company, the petroleum, what do you call, Ephuza Moya Gambe. Now there is another 30 cents coming for the roads agency, you know. Now, at the same time here, you are sequestrating the availability of cheap means of transportation for the rank and file of the Swazi. The Dubais offered simple transportation for the ordinary person. Now, they are removed in the market. And the minister is going to bring a bill to introduce the third party. Now, all these things are dependent on the volumes of cars on the roads, on our national roads. But if you don't have that, that is the money that you need. But if you try to reduce the issue of importation of the Dubais, in order for the ordinary person, you know, I think we'll all agree. Thina nasikhulako bekuba nabo esikolweni ukhanze thisha lomkhulu nguye lo nemoto, headmaster nje. Ya headmaster. Nyalo na ufika esikolweni uthswe ukuthi kunemhlangano webatali because every teacher unemotona yakhe nje, unemoto yakhe kanjalo kanjalo. Because they can afford. Minister ke program yakhe no, because of sakho stikhathe lithi motor. Why are you going to get all these levies, Minister? All that are dependent on the fuel. How many minutes, Bob?
Seconds.
Having said that, let me just say, as a parting shot, we commend the government for reducing, well, it's the report, reducing parastatals. Parastatals, they are sucking the consolidated fund like nobody's business. So we have said, and we support this, the government has to merge where it's possible those parastatals that are more or less similar to each other. But those that are not even proving, those that you cannot even sell for nothing, you need to remove them from the face of the earth. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Siyabonga Mhlonishwa. Mavi. Buyashiva kati usicedzela.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, the PS and the Ministry of Finance, the Deputy Governor, the Honorable Member of Parliament, Babemawi Khumalo, Captains of Industry, members of the media, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all this morning. Ligama lami nguMava Gatwala. I'm here to represent the United Nations Development Program, just to highlight a few reflections that we sort of reflected upon in the national budget. Because of time, ladies and gentlemen, I will dive into it immediately. We do note as the UN family the context under which this budget was formulated. It was a very difficult period. It's a very difficult context. You have your COVID-19 pandemic. You have your slow economic growth, which has been ongoing for the longest time. You have very high unsustainable levels of unemployment. And on top of that, you then have the unprecedented civil unrest. So these are all the intractable development challenges that the minister and the ministry had to navigate between as part of formulating the national budget. But we also do note that looking at the budget in its entirety, we got the sense that there was a bit of balancing that the minister was attempting, which is economic stimulation by supporting the private sector through various policy interventions, and also trying to support inclusivity or inclusiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, as I move along with my presentation, focusing on key highlights of the budget. The first issue, which has been discussed quite extensively this morning, is the issue of the corporate tax. We do understand what it stands to bring and the positive gains that it stands to bring in the economy. But more importantly, as the UNDP, we encourage government to embrace evidence policy-based decision. I think Dr. Mike Matsebula spoke about this quite extensively earlier on in the day. And we do think that even though there are obvious benefits to this policy move, but there could be other economic disruptions that we are not aware of. We are also aware that within the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development and the central bank, there is a lot of capacity, people that can sit down and undertake these simulations and dig into the numbers so that we have deeper understanding of what is going on behind the scene. But we welcome this move by the minister. The increase of the tax bracket for the low-income earners, we view this as some form of social protection for the vulnerable. I think the Honorable Member of Parliament has spoken about that, and this is a good move. We also note that government is continuing with its commitment to support social protection, particularly focusing on the vulnerable and the marginalized. However, we do call upon a structured approach to this. UNDP has been working quite extensively with the Deputy Prime Minister's office in putting together a social security policy, or rather improving it or revising it. I think last week we had our validation session looking at the revised social protection policy and also going through the implementation plan. We do hope that the minister will take into consideration those initiatives and incorporate the recommendations in the upcoming national budget, because we do believe that if we are to deal with the issues of social protection, we must have a structured approach. We also welcome the resuscitation of the factory shell program, which has been implemented previously. We do hope that it will bring the much desired FDI inflow. However, we do call upon the scrutinization of the nature of jobs that we are creating for the people of Eswatini. But more importantly, again, it is important to reflect on the program, the previous one, how it was implemented, the challenges encountered, the positives, the entire cost-benefit analysis, so that we learn from our past and we improve as we go into the future. ladies and gentlemen, the minister also highlighted 4 key issues in his budget speech. The first one being the high level of unemployment, particularly as it relates to the youth, the challenges experienced by our health system, given the shortages of medicines and the shortages of beds, the education system, which seems not to be responding or producing industry-specific skills so that our graduates easily find employment. And he also highlighted on the issues of service delivery. However, looking at the entire budget, one question that we had was that, does the budget allocation reflect all of these issues highlighted by the minister? And we are not quite sure if it does. By the look of things, there is no strong, robust, comprehensive youth program that will deal with the unemployment. And we want to say this morning that the UN family stands ready to help government put in place such a program. We also noted with a bit of concern the reduction in the health expenditure, even though the minister in his own words has noted that we should not let down our guard as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also the issue of education, we have the Education for All declaration, we're still falling short of the required 20%.
3 minutes.
Yes, sir. And as it relates to service delivery, we note that government is still moving with very old policies, such as the government general orders, which were put in place in 1969. Budget allocation, I've already noted that education still falls short of the 20% required. The reduction of the health budget, which is a bit of a concern on our end. And I've already highlighted the issue of embracing evidence-based policy intervention, which is very important. Points for consideration. We do want to submit today that reduced tax can be an attraction for private capital formation, but that should be provided within an environment that is conducive to investment. So a lot of effort should go towards improving the investment climate so that we are able to encourage the ease of doing business. We also want to call upon government to embrace e-government and the benefits of digitalization. And the UN system and the UN family stands ready to support government with that, to improve efficiencies, reduce cost, and to curb corruption. Designing of a comprehensive youth program, I've already touched on this. This is very important, and Honorable Minister, we need to be intentional about this, because this is a serious pandemic that is going to only get worse if it is not given the necessary attention. We need to also leverage on the small-scale guarantee scheme to support a comprehensive youth program and perhaps reconsider the location of the scheme. Has it worked for us? And we need to work towards ensuring that we improve access while at the same time ensure that we grow the fund. So we need to sit around the table and think about all of these opportunities. Because of time, Mr. Dlamini, I will end my presentation right here. Otherwise, the next part would have been covering what UNDP is doing to support government as it relates to national priorities. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, I do see that there are a lot of questions that the Minister has drafted, and I've taken the courtesy to also give him those that have been flighted on Slido, so he can pick the ones he would want to respond to. It is now time, Honorable Minister, for you to respond to the many questions that have been raised. Honorable Minister.
It's easier for me. Sorry, if it's easier if you put it back there, because I'm holding my booklet. took their masks off, so I'll follow suit. Sorry, there, maybe. Oh, you want to see that? Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. Right, thank you very much to everyone who did presentations. And of all the years that I've been doing the budget seminar, I think this is the best year so far. So somehow there's improvement. Normally it feels like the beatings are worse. So either my skin is getting thicker, or else things are actually on the improvement. So no, thank you to everyone who made contributions. What I appreciate is when there's balance. You know, I've got no problem as government. We need criticism. We do well in a criticism, but at the same time saying, Minister, right, well done here, well done there, but here we need to improve. I really appreciate that. It means that one's coming with a balanced view and a balanced approach to this. So again, I'm not so sure how much time I have, but I'll just be marching through. And if I really start going over time, Skumbuzi, you're welcome to growl at me as well, for me also to slow down and finish. Right, let me start with the questions from Clement. Was citizens' participation in pre-budget spot on. We were discussing, funny enough, just pre-budget this year. We're having proper discussions as finance to say we need to do more in this space. We commit as Ministry of Finance is to do more in the space, make platforms available for, not only make platforms available for people to be able to contribute on email addresses or input, but at the same time possibly even visits to Tinkundla centers to be able to really get input pre-budget phase. It's a program that we'll work on as finance for this coming year to be able to have input from them. Obviously what we do with the inputs, we'll obviously just do what we can, but to know will really help a lot and be able to assist us to be able to come up with a more balanced approach and at least just recognize those things, let alone what you can do about it, but knowing where the issues are is critical. Young people to access land, I think we had a whole discussion on the access to land issues. And again, I think at the moment, it would be ideal for the youth, for instance, to access their own land. But right now, you know, I think what I touched on in the speech was, if you look at the Highveld, the place where we've got high rainfall area, where you put maize in the ground and it grows without irrigation, you know, less than half of the contoured land. So we're not talking of open areas, we're talking of contoured. At some point, the government must have spent huge amount of money on contouring all this land in the Highveld because of the slopes, so that one can plant these areas and so that you don't have too bad erosion. Of the contoured areas, less than half is being planted. So hence, we're encouraging the youth. You know, if a youth speaks to the homestead that he's at and says, can I please use the unused land? Obviously, we're encouraging to say, what can we do as a country to try to improve that, get that better? Driving entrepreneurship is another whole science. And again, if we can do research as a country to say, what can we do to drive research what can we do with research to drive entrepreneurship? For some reason, it is and again, there's obviously many schools of thought around this. That is many studies being done about it. What makes an entrepreneur be an entrepreneur? And I'm actually not sure what that is. You know, when I was this size, I tried a scrap metal business selling scrap irons I could find on the farm to my grandparents. It failed. The grandparents threw them out on the way home. When I was this size, I tried a cut flower business, and I did flowers and painted them and tried to sell them. I sold 2 bunches of flowers, I think, to my family. When I was this size, I tried a rabbit business, and I had hundreds of rabbits at some stage. Only to find I'm trying to sell these rabbits, and my Swati was saying, "Oh, lento, stamzingela leti kwacha angeke siphathane." So again, another business failure. And when I was about this size, I saw there's honey in the ceiling of our roof in our home. There was bees that were causing problems there actually. And I went in there and cut the stuff up and got stung terribly and started selling honey and pellets. And that was now a success. And that started me off as an entrepreneur, and off I went in business. So, and here I am today in the position of the Minister of Finance. It is a quite strange cycle of life. But the bottom line is entrepreneurship really is something that we need to somehow try and get through, somehow create that intent, which I think research, and we look at our own model, because the problem is we can say what worked in another country. Another country is not in Maswati. We need to try and research what works for us, what somehow ticks this box and get this right. I'm passionate about it, and I really believe we need to try and unlock that, because there's an unlocked potential. We have the resources, we have the means, and like I said, everyone has access to something. So we really encourage one to use what one has in line with what was mentioned in the budget. More than 100,000 have disabilities. You're right. The disability issue I know is a tough one. Again, please understand, disabilities, at some point while loading timber, I squashed my finger and it doesn't bend anymore. So now I qualify for a disability grant because my finger doesn't bend. So I think we need to understand there's obviously disability and there's disabilities. So we need to, so I think what we're trying to do as a government is to say, where are those disabilities, where is it really a crisis? And where can we really help someone that is heavily affected by a disability? And try and move our way up the value chain so that we actually, people that, even though they have a disability, they can at least still take care of themselves somehow. We end with them, because unfortunately we do have limited resources as a country, and we need to just try and continue to, I think it's a matter of progressing along that line to continue to try and improve in this area, rather than actually not recognizing it, not seeing it. The PAYE increase will result in a brain drain. These obviously things were considered, and we do take these on board. Again, like I say, this measure, there's another question coming up to say, when is it due, Minister? Be open with us on the Slido. And number one, this must still be tabled in Parliament. Already, the battle lines have been drawn by now, and I can see it. It looks like really quite clear who's going to lose this fight. But at the same time, I must say we'll have the discussion, and we'll have the discussion in Parliament, and we'll look at the different measures. Possibly come up with a mix. Possibly say, let's do it over a staggered thing. Let us maybe play around with the brackets. Let's see what can work the best for Maswati. But it is something that I feel we need to have the discussion on. And so hence it will come, we'll look at it, but please understand the measure is for 2023-2024, which means that even if we are successful in any way with doing any change on PAYE, it's applicable from the 1st of April 2023. People are angry and we need to deal with this. Have we provided enough? I think there were other questions also to say that, we have victims of the unrest. I think Mr. Nhlangamandla was touching on that too. These questions more or less come into this. This is correct. Obviously, a very tough issue to talk about. And again, but at the same time, unless you actually deal with it, I think in the budget, I think I was trying to be as open and transparent as I can, is to say we recognize this, we need to deal with it as a country, we need to get down and talk. We have a Sibaya in the Constitution. We need to recognize that, we need to respect that, and we need to start there. We'll see where we end with this dialogue and how that all works out. But we have to start with what we know as a Maswati works for us and has worked for us for hundreds of years. And so hence there's a budget obviously for that, and you'll see the budget is budgeted so that if something does come out of that, that we can accommodate that too, and that we can also speak to what that looks like and try and fix. I think then the question on the victims, I'll now start going into Emmanuel Nhlangamandla's questions. And to say that one didn't do anything for the victims, at the end of the day, I think the victims went to government hospitals. I think one has still done what one normally does with any other victim in the country to whatever might go on in the country. And hence, at the same time, I think in my budget, I spoke of legal aid. We're introducing legal aid as a country, which is a big breakthrough, I really believe, where at the moment, someone has to, if you want to go to court, you must pay for your own lawyer, where some people just cannot afford that, which means they are not getting justice for their cases because they cannot afford legal representation. Legal aid is coming in to come and solve that, to try and fix that problem. And so hence, I think if one looks at this thing holistically, is to say that if a person's disabled now, obviously they qualify for a disability grant. We need to consider that, bring that in there. And so I don't think it's fair to say that they are totally ignored, but at the same time, more could possibly be done. And there we do agree. I think holistically, everyone in the room, government should be doing more on many of these facets. But at the same time, unfortunately, we, as every government, I think economics 101 is, there's a limited resource of everything in the world except one thing, and that is the need of man. So hence, there's always a need for more things, unfortunately, but resources are limited. Why the funeral scheme, Honourable? So again, the funeral scheme has been slightly contentious maybe. What we just found was, again, government just doesn't come up with these things. Just in our research and in our analysis, we did find that sometimes when an elderly person passes away, that the pressure and the debt that the family goes into to try and bury that individual is exorbitant, and many families end up going to Shylocks and end up getting themselves into debt, which they just really battle to get out of and really battle to deal with. And even the elderly, knowing this is again not a good measure. Now, again, we actually, as I stand here, I'm still not sure what exactly the 20 Emalangeni a month means. I know in the business world, when you put 20 emalangeni, you get about a 10,000 emalangeni at least funeral cover. But the problem is the moment you are now just having funeral cover for a category of people above 60 years old, the dynamic changes. So we now obviously going out to tender. We're committing that in 3 months' time it'll be in place, but we'll still see what exactly that amount of money is, which the funeral cover will actually cover for the elderly. Why not recognizing youth? So again, I know this is constant criticism around the youth. As a country, we really, really do recognize the fact that we need to do more in the youth space. But again, if one looks at the budget holistically, 4 billion emalangeni, by far our biggest budget is in education. That is 100% in the space of youth. If you look at our health budget, the youth is accommodated. Every part of the budget obviously has the youth. And I think that we do, people look at the youth fund, or they look at the amount that we're spending in the ministry for youth, and that looks negligible. And I agree, it looks negligible. It looks like we should be able to do more. But the problem is when we do more there, we're taking it away from education, or we're taking it from roads, or we're taking it from somewhere else that often has as big a negative impact on the same youth that we are trying to find employment for or doing whatever it is for. So hence, I think, please understand that this is just a very fine balance between trying to do the most and trying to do the best that we can for the youth in the country. But this is a critical area that I really believe now that the foundations are getting fixed and we can start building on it, the youth will definitely stand to benefit the most because they have the highest percentage of unemployment and need that we have in the country. CTA, I think the question was CTA, has the petrol crisis being sorted out? It has. We had a petrol problem in the beginning. There were a few issues, not only the fact that trading account was shut, the companies that were supplying had issues, there were back payments needed, the disbursement of fuel in the country was cockeye, but that has all been fixed and it is now under control, and for about 3 months now actually, it has actually been sorted out. The cancer patients being turned back, I think there was a comment on that. And I think that you're right. I mean, none of the funds are perfect, and you'll find that there are holes in it. But I think on the cancer front, as what was touched in the speech, and that is that we have now developed a new cancer ward within the Ministry of Health. As a country, we are not doing enough ourselves, especially at the stage 1, 2, and 3 of cancer. Now, by the time I get to stage 4 cancer, we might still need to, have to send people outside the country for specialized treatment in specialized areas. Obviously, cancer can be all sorts of different kinds of cancer. But at least the early stages, which is where we are lacking, we are now putting the facilities in place, and we believe we're going to be a whole lot better. In fact, we're going 3 times what we currently have. Within a month or 2, we're going to be doing 3 times the amounts of cancer treatment in country than what we were doing before. The fiscus, the problem to health. So I think health in general, again, I think there was a question on health. I'll just try and touch on where questions sometimes overlap. There was another question on health around why is the budget being reduced? I think the budget has not been reduced. The budget on health has actually been increased. But I think one needs to understand that last year's budget on health had a huge COVID element to it, which we do not have this year. Last year we had 200 million for vaccines. This year we got 0 for vaccines because we still have vaccines coming forward, and the vaccines that we have can still last us, is what the Ministry of Health is saying. We budgeted over 100 million for investments in the Manzini TB hospital that we turned to be able to be a hospital for COVID, for the Lubombo wing that we built at Stegi for the referral hospital. And so hence, if you actually take those out, you'll find the health budget has actually increased quite a bit. Because you will know, I mean, Honorable Khumalo helped us to get these supplementary budgets through for health. We somehow found that the amount for catering, the amount for pills was not enough, and we have now added that in to this year's budget to make sure we don't have the same supplementary issues that we had the last year. Hope to be able to sit around the table in a dialogue. Again, the nice thing about Sibaya is everybody is, every Liswati is welcome to be able to come and say, and I do personally believe, and the Sibaya platform to start is actually to be able to get the pain out, for the pain to be able to land on it for every person in a safe environment, which Sibaya really is and has traditionally been for hundreds of years in the country. For it being a safe place to get the pain out of what's the pain, who's in pain, what's caused the pain, is critical for the nation. And hence, I really believe that it's the right platform to start. And the beauty of that table is everyone is welcome around the table. 36% only if taxpayer has a return on investment. I agree. Mr. Ndlangamandla, and that is that at the moment it feels like as taxpayers, and let me put the taxpayer hat on here, it feels like one is not getting a return on one's investment, if one can see it that way. And so hence, if one is looking at taxation, we have to fix these things. The road infrastructure that's wrong, the medicines and hospitals, these elements. If one is paying a higher tax, countries in the world pay a huge amount more tax than us, but there's a better balance between outcome compared to where we are now. And so hence, the focus is there. I really believe in the next year, with what we're doing now on the roads, we're busy doing a big exercise in the Ministry of Health trying to fix the health crisis, we should be able to get a lot of these better so that a taxpayer, at least your family can go to and get medicines, at least you can drive on the roads, at least you can get a decent education. Those are measures. These things have to go together. Very good point. We do need to make sure of that. Budget should show what we value. Again, we think we're doing that, Mr. Ndlangamandla, but again, obviously, sometimes these things are in the eye of the beholder. It's difficult to know exactly what everyone values. But I think we're trying to say that education priority, health priorities. We're trying to get that right. But like I say, a budget is a very, very fine balance between people's perspectives. Mr. Gina from Tokoswa did mention that the corporate tax reduction, is it supplemented by the 3%? I think I did unpack it earlier, so I know obviously you had your notes ready prepared before the time, but these are two very separate issues. The PAYE thing is purely money going from the top to the bottom of PAYE, nothing coming to government, nor cross-subsidizing something else we're doing in tax. And the corporate tax one is again just wiggling within the corporate, within all the different tax elements within company tax. So all we are doing is we're saying let's add presumptive tax, late payments on PAYE, taking away some of the allowables, which means at the moment when you invest in the country, you invest in capital, we are reducing the amount that you can claim back on because there were certain benefits there. We're taking those things away, at the same time reducing tax, because the rest of the world is going in that direction. It's called a race to the bottom. Sadly, as a Minister of Finance, it's a race to the bottom. COP7 said countries, we need to put a floor here. We cannot allow big companies around the world to end up paying zero company tax. So the world is agreeing to say, let's stop at 15%. But I think as economists in the room, one needs to understand, what does that mean? We are going to 15%. We are all ultimately going to be at 15%. And the last one there is going to be the one losing business along the way. And those that try and get there a bit sooner are the ones that at least hold on to their businesses and possibly get other businesses to come on board. And hence, that's the measure for the company tax. And again, I think it somehow felt like, okay, well, somehow we are now benefiting business people. Please, again, as economists, I think you understand very clearly, when that businessman now takes money out of his company, he's subjected to the exact same personal tax as everyone else in the country. He's now not necessarily benefiting personally from the company tax. So when the company tax goes down, even if it wasn't for the other measures in company tax, when that individual takes his money out as a salary and ultimately dividends, taxes, we can balance all these things to make sure that the individual in his personal capacity is not now better off than someone who's got a white-collar job probably and paying from his salary. At the same time, the 9,000 jobs that I've created, I think in my speech I tried to also make it clear that the 9,000 jobs, those we are referring to the permanent jobs. There was an additional 4,500 jobs in the construction space. And the reason why I separated it, Mr. Kina, was specifically to your point, because to now count these 4,500 jobs, to say, oh, we're bragging about the 4,500 jobs, it's short-lived and it might not be there tomorrow. Construction, obviously, every year there'll be a X billion in the capital budget. We hope that those do continue, but we cannot count as permanent jobs. But the 9,000 are permanent jobs. Those are factory shells we are building, private sector coming in, and we do believe that there is a wake-up there. And maybe just to touch quickly on that, and that is that we really are seeing virtually all the big companies in Eswatini are going through expansion phases. Now, again, ask me what's the logic. Sometimes I look up and I say, hey, mbonga nkulunkulu nje, because sometimes I don't understand exactly why it would be. You would think in the current economic pain, that your economic and social pain we're going through, that companies will be fleeing. Companies are expanding, especially those big companies. And I might be wrong to speak to each one of them, but I know all these things and I can unpack them. But there's surprising growth out there. Last year we were expecting a 1.4% growth. the numbers are showing 5.9%. We've virtually got a 6% growth for last year when we had this civil unrest. So I'm saying sometimes you just look at these things and people can say it's a rebound. We only went down 1.9% in the previous year. So it's not other countries that went down much harsher. You understand them having a 6% bounce back. We went down 1.9 and we're bouncing back 6. So hence there's something taking place in our economy that is definitely showing life and showing improvement in this space. So what we are doing, and hence this post-COVID recovery plan that we have launched with all those different measures, with huge investment, a lot of that is taking place and it's starting to show in the numbers. And again, the 5.9 is still a prediction, but it's now based on 3 months of real figures, and we're still just estimating the last quarter. But and because of three fixed quarters already been in place, it can't move too much now from it. So it's around there somewhere. It's around the 6% growth for last year, which is something big. As a nation, we haven't been there in a very long time, and I think we are entering growth space. And I think keeping in mind that, I think another question was on mining, was to say that we, at the moment, there's a whole lot of mining licenses being issued. So if we just have 2 mines open, what I'm saying, it'll have a 3-4% GDP bump that year that this mine's open because of the size of our economy. And so these things are all taking place now. I really do presume, I'm a bit of an optimist sometimes, and I declare that, and I sometimes confess that. So excuse the optimism, but at the same time, I do foresee that our economy, in the medium term, I'm not talking of guaranteeing long term, but in the medium term, things are looking good, and we are doing a few things to try and fix that. You touched on the fact that private sector is not good for good jobs. Obviously, I'll disagree, understanding the history I come from there too. One does, obviously the private sector does try and pay as little as possible. So I'm not going to try and bluff to try and say private sector or blue star in this case. But at the same time, the moment there's a demand for jobs, and I'll maybe just touch on my experience at Montigny, and excuse me for that. But for instance, before you wouldn't have a problem finding employees to do civic culture work. Civic culture work meaning you're digging holes, you're pruning trees. At the moment, finding people, and these people earn around 2,000 emalangeni. You might live on the property, get food and everything else, and you get about a 2,000 emalangeni salary. You're not finding people willing to do those jobs right now. So that work is now being done mechanically, which means that you could maybe have utilized 300-400 people in that space. It's now done by machines. But the advantage of that, again, is the fact that the machine operator is earning 15 to 20,000, and there are 3 operators per machine. There's a mechanic, he's earning, and everyone now in the value chain of mechanization are earning a whole lot better salaries than the 2,000 salaries at the bottom. So as a country, even though we talk of unemployment, the cane, you do not find people willing to cut cane anymore. The cane cutting industry is moving over to mechanical almost holistically. So one is finding that even though we have the unemployment numbers, we also need to keep in mind these are because of our education, because we are starting to educate, we are finding the youth are saying, hold on a sec, I've got a schooling, I've got a tertiary education. I'm not willing to cut cane, I'm not willing to dig a hole. But hence, as a government, the real pressure on us is to say that we need to now create jobs where the jobs are needed. And hence, in the 9,000 jobs, you'll find there is quite a bit of those businesses there which are more in the space of higher earning. But that needs to be the focus. We need to create better jobs, not just jobs. But at the same time, not neglect to say that if someone wants to work in a textile factory for 1,700 emalangeni a month around that space, that to say, well, hold on a sec, as government, we're not going to create those jobs is again not fair. Speak to the individual, they'll be saying to you, I would rather have the job for 1,700 than not have the job. And so hence, for us as government to say, no, well, let's not allow those jobs is again not smart. We have to try and do that. But we can be a lot smarter on where we locate that. So at the moment, we are building factory shells, and the factory shells we're building are now more in the rural areas because we are saying bringing all the young people in the country round to an industrial site in Matsapa is again socially not a good idea. And hence, if we can rather have someone leaving their home, even taking a taxi possibly to work and going back home tonight, socially, it's a whole lot smarter. Financially, it's a whole lot smarter. So we are also trying as a government to try and locate these factory shells so that even if it is a lower paying job, at least you're living at home and you're not having all the expenses of electricity, rents, and all the other elements that come with you having to migrate from where you are into a certain area. So we're trying to be a lot smarter in that space, but again, I'm sure there's still a lot to learn. Honourable Khumalo has asked about political interference on central bank. We definitely are trying to behave in that space. they believe that he doesn't believe the budget is pro-poor. And again, I think to use the words in my budget, I did mention that all of these, in doing the tax measures, we considered the poor and we tried to make sure that it hasn't got a big impact on the poor. The pro-poor headlines was the headlines of the newspaper the next day. It wasn't me necessarily saying, rah, this is a pro-poor budget. Again, even the word poor, we need to probably try and move away from that word. It isn't a great word to use. But what we have done in the budget is we've tried to make sure that whatever we are doing, we are cushioning those that are less better off than those that are better off. So that was the direction. The Dubais, I know there's different views on the Dubais, and I think one needs to also look at, as a continent, most countries don't allow older Dubais. Some countries allow newer ones, which means they've got age restrictions, normally up to about 7 years old. At the moment where we are, and they don't even have SACU. You know, the reason why what the main drive for the Dubai reasoning was because to try and improve our SACU receipts, but at the same time, most countries without SACU are still doing these measures because citizens that buy old vehicles that are imported are normally not happy about their decisions years later. And again, maybe yourselves even in the room, speak to 10 people you know that have bought Dubais. 3 years down the line, are they happy they bought a Dubai? When you buy the Dubai, we fully understand that thrill of having a car. I remember it myself, getting your car, having wheels, the thrill of having it. I get all that, and we have that. But as a country and as macroeconomists, we have to look at the greater good rather than the feeling when you drive your first set of wheels. And hence, we need to be able to say what's better for the bigger picture, what's better for the country, as well as the fact that in that industry space, there's obviously a lot of pain. But a carbon footprint of these vehicles, there's a lot of reasons why this is done, not only SACU. So hence I'm saying, please look at this slightly holistically and from a macro point of view, not necessarily from every individual on the ground. We believe that we are doing it for the individuals. When SACU receipts go up, where does the money go? Back into their hands, back to creating jobs, back to fixing the inefficiencies on the ground. Otherwise, he then says PU reforms are critical. I think of the PU reforms, maybe to touch on those. So we spoke somewhere, I think someone mentioned 15, we're shutting 15 of them down. That's not the case. I think there are 2 that we're looking at possibly shutting down. In fact, sorry, the one privatizing, the one shutting down. But most of it is actually merging, or it is bringing them back into the ministry and being able to make them all more efficient. The cost saving, we are aiming towards about a 2 billion Emalangeni cost saving. But please understand, that really is setting the bar very high for ourselves. But I think we can all be realistic. If we hit a 1 billion saving year, it's a huge benefit, and it's going to benefit our economy fantastically, because the objective isn't only a cost saving. The objective is also higher performance. There's a whole lot of measures being done here, but we expect the entities to perform better, to perform smarter by the time we are finished with this exercise. And the idea is not to leave the economy worse off after we are done. The idea is to leave it a whole lot better off. We then had questions from UNDP, Mr. Mavi, in connection with low growth. So obviously, with my discussions earlier, I know that we have got a long history of low growth, but it does seem like we had a turning point, and more by God's grace than design maybe, but it does seem like there is some change there, and I think the measures we are doing is starting to drive that. Use evidence policy based on the approach of the 25%. We don't pull these things out the air. We do spend a lot of time on it. We use researchers from Ministry of Finance, researchers from ERS. At the same time, we obviously have discussions with the IMF and such before we actually make these moves, and we felt like it was a policy-based approach that we used to be able to come with these outcomes. Social protection from the UN. Number one, we highly value the UN's input in our country, their focus on social protection, social development is highly appreciated. What I'm saying, you guys really do drive the agenda there on the SDGs, and as a country, we're constantly looking at these SDGs, trying to fix them. We probably need to engage more and to try and really benefit more from the UN's expertise and the UN support from this. But I just want to say, as Cabinet, I know that there's a constant focus on this and direction on it. The kind of jobs being created. So as a country, I think I did speak to that earlier, and it is something that is definitely also looked at, but at the same time, not saying, you know, if there is a textile manufacturer wanting to come in, let's exclude him. We are still saying if we can accommodate that and there's a need for it, let's bring it anyway, but place it more strategically. No robust program for the youth. I believe we can improve here. So again, I'll invite the UNDP. I'll speak to my colleagues to say that if there is support and direction you can give us, let us come up with a better holistic program for the youth. Spot on. Let's definitely try and do that. I wasn't aware that we weren't doing what we could on that front. Concerning the health reduced budget, I did touch on that. Focus on the ease of doing business. The Ministry of Commerce is really, really working very hard on that. I know they engage with yourselves too. It is unfortunately, it is a process, and we'll definitely continue going down that road. Digitize e-government, a critical need. As finance, we've been talking about that. We have even put, for instance, e-procurement in the budget. We are walking down that road. We need to go faster. We accept that, and we'll continue to do what we can. Leverage the guarantee scheme, possibly add more funding to it. I think the funding that we have got in the moment is really just a seed, is to say, is it going to be taken up? Is it going to work? We've now changed the rules quite heavily. On the two guarantees, there's obviously the export loan guarantee scheme as well as the loan guarantee scheme, or SME loan guarantee scheme, and we've got limited funding in each, but the moment we see it being used and it being effective, definitely, it's a winner. It can grow the economy very quickly. We'll definitely invest in that if we see it working. Right, we then went to some questions, is to say that some of the questions were, Lesotho is at 30% ceiling on PAYE, Botswana 25%, Mozambique 32%. Why are we going higher when our neighbors are lower than us? I think obviously what we're forgetting there is Namibia and South Africa. Those two are higher than us, even higher than our proposed amounts that we are going to. And so we do feel as a region we are not actually going beyond what is needed. We're kind of going to aiming to hit ourselves in the middle there somewhere, rather than on the higher than the lower. CSR, there was a question to say, shouldn't we put policies in place for companies to spend on CSR? I think we do. I think it's called taxation, and companies pay tax for that reason. The moment you try and bring policies to say, hey, as a company, you need to now do ABC, all you're doing is adding more tax. If we need to add more tax, we add more tax, or we bring that in a certain way. But to come with policies to try to force companies to do more CSR, CSR is really an initiative where the company is saying it's out of my free will. And the moment you force that free will, you're going to also do away with a lot of the do good that some companies are trying to do in the country. And hence I think that to bring the rules in place on CSR might actually push ourselves backwards rather than forwards. South African companies selling services in Eswatini and not paying company tax or not paying tax in Eswatini. I think we need to understand, and what people don't realize is we do have a withholding tax on services from exterior companies. It's about 15%. So which means at the moment, if there's a company that comes in from Langaphandle, it comes into Eswatini, and it provides services in the country, there's a withholding tax of 15% on them. Where we have double taxation agreements with other countries, it can come down to 10%, but it's not lower than 10%. And hence, there's a 10% at least margin for any Leswati company competing in that space. So really we need to, as eMaSwati, we really need to look at this. We're spending a huge amount of money for services from outside. And we really have to look at this, even when it comes to our scholarships that we are giving to students studying outside the country. Where's the need? Where's the lack? Focus on that and really try and get that in. It is a focus area we need to try and get right. That question was really spot on, but we need to... but we actually are doing measures to try and stop that. And again, this 15%, it's 15% of the invoice. We're not talking about 50% of the profits. It's a huge outcry from some companies because they say, oh, but we did these services, we're only making 10% profits, and now you're taking 15% of the invoice. It is an outcry out there, but we're doing what we can, I think, as government to try to promote these services being in country. We're still owing lots of money to suppliers. That is not correct. Sorry, if I must be fully transparent, there's a 43 million emalangeni from the old CTA amounts that is still not paid to certain suppliers. There's a real mess there. These suppliers supplied goods without orders, and we're busy sorting it out. We hopefully in a month or two will have that sorted out. It's being focused on right now. But when it comes to suppliers in general, we are paying our bills on time. As I stand here, the money that is sitting in our arrears column is money that we still need to put into the certain amount into the reconstruction fund. It's money to East Wade, which is not critical right now for East Wade. It's money that must go towards certain subventions that are not due yet. It's money that is due. It's monies that are internal on projects we haven't started yet, or projects that are not demanding the cash yet. So hence the arrears that we have on book, it is not to outside suppliers. There's been a huge focus and blood, sweat, and tears trying to get this right, to try and make sure suppliers get paid on time. And I think we are really very close to being fully on track with the payment to suppliers. Admit that roads are in a bad state was the one question, I think, in my the questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much. At this point, before I ask a few questions of my own, I have 10 for you, Minister. I don't know whether I can ask them, but I'm sure the Deputy Governor will respond to the 15 that I asked her to talk to in her closing remarks. Deputy Governor, please come to the podium for your closing remarks, and remember to respond to the 15 questions.
Thank you, Program Director. If I may, remove my mask. And received the request yet. Program Director, Honorable Minister Finance, members of Houses of Parliament, they have left. CEO, Management Directors of Private Sector, ICA's President, Professor Mike Matabula, senior government officials, my peers, panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Still morning, good morning. On behalf of the Central Bank of Eswatini and the Economics Association of Eswatini, who once again collaborated to organize this event, it is an honor and a privilege for me to make closing remarks in this seminar. Minister, my work is simple, so unlike you, I just have to make a few remarks. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to ICAS and the Central Bank staff for investing their time, limited resources, and effort in preparation for this seminar. The success we have all witnessed is an indication that a lot of effort was put in place in planning this event. To echo the ICAS President, Professor Matsebula's words, I also wish to commend the Minister of Finance for once again availing himself and agreeing to deliver the keynote address, focusing on the highlights of the 2022-23 National Budget Speech. It is indeed appreciated, Honorable Minister, for you to find time in your busy schedule and be amongst us this morning. At this point, Honorable Minister, allow me to flow from Professor Matsebula's comments on the importance of evidence-based policies and research. In my view, these have to be anchored on good quality data. Therefore, while recognizing the efforts that the country has made to improve data collection, data mining, I do want to say it is critical that investments in improving the quality of data, the granularity of data, to inform research and policy formulation should continue. Let the numbers talk for themselves. And as the famous saying goes, that is liked by statisticians, if you cannot measure it, you definitely cannot manage it. Having said that, let me continue and applaud the Honorable Minister on the emphasis on addressing the macroeconomic bottlenecks to put the country on a sustainable trajectory. The Honorable Minister has also addressed the issues that were raised by the panelists and participants. We have all benefited in this interactive session with the Minister. Program Director, may I also extend my appreciation to the panelists who have agreed to participate in this forum. As has been the case previously, the forum provides professionals from both the public and the private sector to share their views on the national budget in an open environment for the Honorable Minister's consideration. The hope is that some of the comments will help inform future budget formulation. Our panelists have indeed provided a balanced picture from the viewpoint of the constituencies they represent on how they interpret the major economic policy in Eswatini that ultimately has an impact on economic growth. The Minister has also applauded the panelists for having that balanced view. Mr. Clement Lamini indicated the issue of land, a complicated topic. The Swazi National Land Tenure System has both positives and negatives. The positives have thus far outweighed the negatives as a key social security element. If you've traveled to a few countries, both in Africa and abroad, you will see homelessness glaring at you. This feature is not prevalent in Eswatini. Notwithstanding, efforts should continue that will make the land more productive and accessible. In 2019, SWADE was applauded, and the country was applauded for being able to use Swazi Nation land to empower the citizens. It was looked at as from the African Development Bank's perspective as the leader in this regard. References are being made to Eswatini, even to Rwanda, which we look for up to. Rwanda wants to come and learn from us how to use Swazi Nation land. Going forward, the reforms should strike the right balance. The land reforms should strike the right balance and not undermine the security of having a home for a Maswati, irrespective of status. As we have witnessed that the discussants' viewpoints were indeed balanced, as they were drawn from different constituencies, including academia, workers, legislator, etc. Once again, thank you for your astute scrutiny of the budget. Discussants noted and appreciated the dilemma the Honorable Minister faces when formulating the budget amid resource constraints. There was also emphasis on value for money in the form of good service delivery, while noting the challenges that have been presented by the prevalence of COVID-19 pandemic on infrastructure and service delivery. To all the participants, including those who have joined us virtually, thank you very much for attending and making this event so interactive. You have never failed us. The enthusiastic interactions we have had today is an indication that you have all familiarized yourselves with the national budget presented by the Honorable Minister on February 18, 2022. Be that as it may, it is also important for us all to note that this forum is solely meant to encourage dialogue and also provide constructive inputs to the budget and its process. Therefore, this seminar is rather an information sharing and exchange platform from which we believe we can collectively indicate the key areas of national interest. May I emphasize that it is not a forum to criticize each other. Clearly, from these discussions, one gets the sense, Honorable Minister, that there is scope for more socio-economic dialogue in the country, as this would enhance focus on issues and inform broadly policy formulation. The pre-budget forums that you have mentioned, Honorable Minister, would definitely be welcome. Program Director, our team from ICAS and the bank has taken notes, I assume, of the summary of key points which have raised by all speakers, including those shared through the virtual platform. I also want to believe that we have taken note of the questions that were raised as well. We will therefore endeavor to share these within 10 days to all registered attendees and anyone requesting copies. This will by no means be binding, but rather notes to be considered by the Honorable Minister and the legislature in appropriate forums as they further deliberate on the budget. The summary will also help to inform us on how best we should have these sessions, even more participative going forward, while recognizing the limitations presented by COVID-19 and recognizing that it is not going anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, let me end my remarks by thanking you all for your honest, constructive, focused deliberations, which has provided the ministry with good advice, I hope, PS, on how to effectively implement the presented budget. As part of the bank's responsibility to offer advice to government, I wish to assure you, Honorable Minister, that we stand ready to give you support and advice. As you indicated, Honorable Minister, the reform journey will be painful in the short term. However, the rebalancing to address the reservation wage and drive a private sector-led growth will put the country on a sustainable path and support broad-based long-term gains. I also want to reassure you, Honorable Minister, that we will continue to work with you as you implement these fiscal and structural reforms. On behalf of the Central Bank, the Governor, and the Economics Association, I once again thank you all for making the session the success it has been, which will pave way to addressing the socio-economic challenges that we are currently facing as a country. With these few remarks, I thank you for your attention, and may God bless you, and grant us safe travel as we disperse to our various workstations. I thank you all.
Siyabonga kakhulu, Dichi. We would want to ask Maga Makanya to please pray for us as before we depart. Maga Makanya.
Ngicela sithandaze. Siyakubonga baba wethu engcwele, siyakubonga isenkosi sethu uJesu Kristu. Sibonga ukuphumelelisa lo mhlangano lomkhulu kangaka. Ngosi sicelile masicala lo mhlangano kuthi bakhona emkhathini wethu kusetiwa tonke tinkulumo nema presentations. Siyabonga Nkosi nema comments lekendiwe kulomhlangano. Nema notes leswathethe kokuthi atawushape le live ahambise le live liphakame libe ngalendlela lesifisa ngayo. Siyacela ke Nkosi uchubeke usiphe inhlakanipho yakho sisachubeka na kwinda wonke umsebenzi konke lokho sikucela sikholwa egameni lika Jesu Kristu. Amen.
The session has ended. Thank you very much.